Master Studies. He is a recipient of JRF Award of University Grants Commission. He has more than 15 years teaching experience in computer science and having taught courses at all levels. And he has published about 100 research papers, supervised 7 theses, and is on reviewing board of more than 10 top-tier SI indexed international journals. He's a senior member of IEEE and ACM, life member of CSI, ITE, and ISSI. So I welcome you, sir. You can proceed with your session. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanika. So, Manishji, we are ready to start.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. So just give me 1 minute. I'm starting the sharing. So the screen is visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'm starting now. So good morning, everyone. In this session, we will be talking about machine learning algorithms, particularly in the domain of text processing. And I could see the schedule that you have for the work for the FDP, and there are already some talks that you may have gone through on machine learning. So I would not talk much about machine learning in that sense, but I would rather talk about how machine learning can be used for different kind of text processing tasks. So we'll look at some of the text processing tasks, and some of these, you might have heard of. For example, this an interesting task which is of interest to industry as well as academia called sentiment analysis. Then similarly, we have document clustering, document classification, and so on. So there are a number of text processing tasks that that where machine learning can be helpful. So this would be the outline that I would be talking about. A very quick look at the contextual settings, why whatever that I'm talking, why all that is important. Then a very small introduction to machine learning in the sense that what is the practical definition, or what is the practical introduction to machine learning. And then finally, how can we apply machine learning and information retrieval, machine learning for information retrieval and text processing. And then we look at three important tasks where machine learning can be applied. Classification of documents into different thematic areas, grouping documents based on similarity between them, and finally, how machine learning is actually being used for sentiment analysis. So this is largely that we'll be talking about. But before we begin, I will show you some advertisements, some job advertisements, which may be of interest to you or to your students and so on. So let's look at some announcements of jobs in India. So it is not valid at the moment, but what I want to show is what kind of skills are needed in jobs which are very well paid. So this is Xerox Bangalore, and what you could see is what they're looking for is text and image mining, graph mining, structure analysis, statistical relational learning, large scale statistical inference. And ideally, what kind of candidate they are looking for is a PhD or master's with either a PhD or master's with some relevant experience in computer science, information systems, or applied stats. So this is essentially a kind of machine learning and statistics group, and the job is a machine learning scientist or a data scientist job. And the kind of skills that are needed is you could easily see, and you would be surprised to guess the package. So this would be something close to 1 crore per annum. So this is the kind of package that is being offered by different companies. So this is a opening by Xerox, 1 crore per annum, and that too within India. You don't have to go to US or UK or Australia to earn this amount of money. So this is a job opening. What is essentially needed is the kind of skill set that they are looking for, and some proven experience. So when I say proven experience, if you're in academia, then you should have at least 1 or 2 good publications, which are there to in one or two good journals or core A conferences. This another opening. Now this time Amazon Bangalore, and what you could see is the desired skills and experience that they're looking for is PhD in machine learning, statistics, optimization, or applied mathematics with some relevant industry or research experience. And essentially, it's for an ad optimization team. And what you could see is you have to work on big data problems, machine learning, data mining, stats, and so on. Okay, so strong depth and breadth knowledge in machine learning, data mining, and statistics. Again, this opening would be something close to 90 lakhs to 1 crore per annum. Another opening, again, Adobe Bangalore. Now what it needs is these kind of skills. So if you have analytics and data mining skills, if you know machine learning, if you know what is natural language processing, either of them, if you know statistical modeling, or if you know information retrieval, or if you know large scale distributed systems and cloud computing, and you are a PhD in computer science, computer engineering, electrical engineering, or related fields with, or a master's with relevant experience, then again, this job is something, like 80 to 90 lakhs per annum. So the point that I wish to make here is that this kind of skill, applying machine learning for data sciences, applying machine learning for text analytics, applying machine learning for image processing, is so high in demand that companies and organizations are ready to pay any amount of money for the right candidates who have these kind of desired skills. Okay. So it is very important that and what else is happening is that the nature of jobs that is there in industry is also changing. Okay. So gone are the days where there were lot of software testers. So most of the software testing job is now automated, and there are some kind of machine learning algorithms which are doing this testing. Okay. So what is happening even in industry is that some kind of reskilling is happening. All those people who have been in software industry for 14, 15 years or for 20 years, they are reskilling themselves with these new kind of skills in machine learning, data sciences, NLP, text analytics, information retrieval, data mining, and so on. So these things are becoming essential in order to remain relevant in industry. And this is not only for industry, even for if you're working in research, if you're in academia, and if you want to publish good papers. Now, any problem that you solve, irrespective of the fact whether it is image processing, whether it is text processing, whether it is some kind of optimization problem, or whatever that you're doing, machine learning algorithms are performing so good that any paper that you communicate, they will always ask you to compare your results with some kind of state of the art machine learning algorithms applied to that. Okay. So journals are demanding that you didn't compare with the deep learning method for this, or you didn't compare with this kind of machine learning algorithms. So your results are not essentially compared and not up to date. Okay. So it is very important that irrespective of the domain in which we are working, whether in industry or in academia, to know this kind of skill set, to have this kind of expertise is not only desirable, it is becoming essential. So it is becoming essential in order to remain relevant in both in industry as well as in academic settings. And why suddenly, everybody's talking about machine learning or machine learning applied to data science or these kind of things? Because, the overall context has changed. Now, what is the overall context? One big reason is the new World Wide Web that we talk about. So I'm showing you some stats from January 2018. 7.5 billion is the world population. Out of that, about 4.02 billion people use internet. That means 53 out of 100 people in the world, they use internet. Okay. And similarly for social media, 42 people out of 100 in the world, they use some kind of social media platform. Now just imagine, so many people using internet, so many people using social media platform is generating a huge amount of user content. And normally that is known as UGC, user generated content. Okay. And this is the user generated content that every industry or everybody is interested in mining. Okay. So because this user generated content has a lot of value, and if you could make sense of whatever is being stated in this user generated content within a reasonable period of time, then you will always be at the top edge, or you will be always be leading in terms of with respect to your competitors. Now, of course, this penetration varies. For example, this is like 88% people in Northern America have access to internet. If you compare with Northern Europe, it's about 94%. So virtually everyone has access to internet. This is not so good in South Asia, but this is improving like anything. For example, in January 2014, this number was 12%, and January 2018, this number is 36%. So we have multiplied at least 3 times within a period of 4 years. So within another 1 or 2 years, this may be as close to 50% and so on. What else is changing? We have new kind of social media platforms, and just let me remind you, there was almost no social media platform before 2003 or 2004. Okay. So these social media platforms are there since 2003, 2004. If you can recall, even World Wide Web is quite a new thing. World Wide Web came in 91, 92, 93. It actually became popular in 93, 94. Okay. So not very old, just 30 years or so. Okay. And initially, during the first 10 years, World Wide Web was largely one-way traffic. So only few people had the desired skills and expertise to create content. And most of the other people were actually consumers. Okay. But what has changed in 2004, 2005 is that the web has become participative. And that is how web has started to be known as Web 2.0 from 2004, 2005 onwards. And what has changed? Web has become participative, so it allows creation and exchange of user-generated content. So this was not possible. There was no Wikipedia before 2001. There was no YouTube before 2004. There was no Facebook before 2000. So no popular Facebook before 2003, 2004. Even there was no Google before 2004. Okay. So many of these new platforms, which are now a kind of platform which you can't think that they never existed, but they actually never existed before 2003, 2004. Okay. So what we have is new kind of platforms which allow people to participate, which allow people to create content, and that is where a lot of content is being generated on the web. And because this amount of content generated on the web is both, it is textual, it is numeric, it is images, it is videos. So what we need is all this could not be processed by manual labor. So what we need is automated methods which could automatically run this, mine all this data and make sense out of this data, derive sense out of this data in a very short period of time, because the data is huge. It is enormous amount of data. So there are different kind of social media platforms. Business Horizons classify this as following types: collaborative projects, for example, Wikipedia; blogs and microblogs, for example, Twitter is a popular microblogging site; social networking news sites like Digg and LeakerNet. Then you have content communities, for example, YouTube; social networking sites, for example, Facebook; virtual social worlds, and so on. So you have digital avatars and so on. So there are number of platforms which have come up during the period of last 14-15 years. And just to give you a glimpse of what is the amount of data generated. Okay, so just look at this fact: YouTube. 1 minute passes and 100 hours of video is uploaded on YouTube. So where does the YouTube content comes from? YouTube content comes from contribution from a large number of users. So anybody can post videos on YouTube, and that is how within 1 minute YouTube becomes richer by another 100 hours of video. Okay. So just imagine the size of data center that YouTube may be needing in order to store this huge amount of video. So a large amount of data is being posted. Look at Facebook. 1.19 billion users globally, a huge amount of people who are actually accessing Facebook. And you may be surprised to know that India accounts for the largest number of Facebook users in absolute numbers. Okay. So India is 250 million users from India for Facebook, followed by United States, which is 230 million users. Look at Twitter. More than 500 million tweets are tweeted daily, are posted daily. So just look at the amount of content. Okay. Now also look at an example of Wikipedia. Okay. So Wikipedia, if you compare Wikipedia with Encyclopedia Britannica, we all know Encyclopedia Britannica, it took about 200 years to develop. It has about 80,000 articles. And who curated the content? Who created the content? about 4,000 experts created the content in Encyclopedia Britannica. And there are a lot of reliability studies which say that it should be rated 8.8 out of 10. Now compare this with Wikipedia. Wikipedia is, there are, 40 million articles in all Wikipedia. So Wikipedia is available in 293 languages. Okay. English Wikipedia alone has 5.5 million articles. So what you could see is 5.5 million articles. Imagine, compare this with 80,000. Many times more. Wikipedia, number of articles in Wikipedia is many times, many folds higher as compared to Encyclopedia Britannica. And Wikipedia actually began in 2001. Okay, so just 20 years old as compared to, so 10 times younger than Encyclopedia Britannica, and many times higher in terms of content as compared to Encyclopedia Britannica. And many people say that content is not good. So many reliability studies have said that the content in Wikipedia is at least as good as 8 out of 10 as compared to 8.8 out of 10 on reliability. So just imagine the amount of content that you have on Wikipedia. And who writes on Wikipedia? Anyone can write. Amateurs are writing, not experts. Okay. So that is how we have a huge amount of content. And those who are working in machine learning and text, they may have seen a lot of research papers where Wikipedia is being mined for different purposes. People are trying to mine Wikipedia for concepts, for links, link analysis, for wiki topic analysis, and so on. So there are a lot of things that Wikipedia is actually being used even by programmers for different computing purposes. So what has changed? We have a new kind of World Wide Web. And let me remind you, in 2005, the Time magazine, which normally publishes a person of the year on its cover, actually had a blank face in 2005, and it was written person of the year is you, Y-O-U, because they wanted to recognize the new web, which allows a lot of people to create content. Okay. So what actually has changed in 2000 from 2004-5 is that we now have data-driven application. So data is the next internet side. And now user is at the center and users add value. Okay. Users as co-creators. So, YouTube will be useless if you remove the content. Wikipedia will be useless if you remove the content. Okay. So what is happening is that these new platforms or these new companies, they are keeping users at the center, and they are saying that my platform or my application would be valuable if it is able to attract a large number of users, because with large number of users also comes a large amount of content. And what has actually changed in terms of the revenue model for the IT industry is that it is now cooperate and do not control. So if you remember, 20 years back, Microsoft used to be the #1 IT company in terms of revenue earned in the world. Now, can you guess? Microsoft is now nowhere close to top 5. So it is about 7th or 8th position in terms of revenue that IT industry makes. Okay. And who is at #1? Facebook. Facebook is now the #1 IT company. Google used to be #1, but since Facebook acquired WhatsApp, it became actually #1 in terms of revenue that they earn. And Google is #2. Okay. And just see, Facebook and Google, most of the services that they offer, they are free. Most of the services that they offer is free. And what they are doing is they're offering services free, they are attracting users, and then they are making money out of the advertising revenue. Okay. So the entire model of earning revenue has changed. And that is where the entire IT industry is changing. And all this is generating huge amount of data. And what has actually happened? Those who know software engineering, you may have read about alpha testing and beta testing. So beta testing is something that is done at the client side where a software is developed and then it is given to the clients to test. And based on the inputs, beta 1 or beta 2 or beta 3 version is released. So what has actually happened is that no software ever attains finality, because in the era of this kind of participative web, people keep on contributing. So now every software goes through a phase of perpetual beta. It never becomes final. It always keeps on following an incremental life cycle. Now let's have a quick look at some important aspects of machine learning, and then we'll move to how machine learning can be applied for text processing. Now, what is machine learning? You may have read definitions and so on, but the only definition that I would like to to share is that algorithms that can learn from data. So what is machine learning? Any algorithm that can learn from data should be an example of machine learning. And what does a machine learning scientist do? A machine learning scientist is essentially building models, and these models are used for decisions, predictions, rather than following explicitly programmed instructions. And as you may have already learned, machine learning may be supervised, it may be unsupervised, or it may be semi-supervised, depending on you have what is the amount of training data that you have. Now, this is a definition which is still a classic definition, taken from book by Tom Michel, 1997. Still a classic book on machine learning. A computer program is said to learn from experience E with respect to some class of task T and performance measure P if its performance at task T measured by P improves with experience. So what essentially matters is this experience E. Okay. So what we are trying to say is that as your algorithm gets more and more data, its performance measured in terms of whatever measurable parameter should improve. And that is what machine learning should be regarded as. Now, how is machine learning different from traditional programming? Now, if you look at traditional programming, what we do in normal imperative programs that we design, we have a computer system which is running a program, and what we supply data as input, and we supply program as input, and what we get is output. So your result, for example, if you want to write a program to check whether a number is prime or not, you give the number and you also specify the program, and your output is whether the number is prime or not. Okay. But what happens in machine learning? We don't give the program. So what we give to the machine learning, machine learning algorithm, we give the input data, we give the output data, and what we'll get out of this input output data mapping is a program. Okay. So what as a machine learning scientist, what is my job? As a machine learning scientist, my job is to develop a model which can learn a mapping between input and outputs. Okay. So I have input data, I know what should be the correct output for this input data. And as a machine learning scientist, I have to learn how to transform this input data. So I have to make a model, or I have to make a program. So what is this program? This program essentially is a model. Now, there are some broad kind of models. This model could be classification model. This model could be a clustering model. This model could be a prediction model. This model could be, any kind of model that we come across. So is machine learning a magic then? No. It's more like gardening. Okay. So what we give is algorithms are my seeds, data is my nutrient, and you are the gardener, and the plants that you get is your programs or models. Okay. So what you get is, if you are a machine learning scientist, your job is to develop a model which can be applied to all problems belonging to a particular class. Okay. Now, this is a simple example that I wanted to show. And this example is drawn from a machine learning course on Coursera by Andrew Ng. So suppose you have a very simple problem. You collect data for a particular city, and the data is essentially this simple data, the size of the house and its price. Okay, very simple data, just two attributes. One of them is the size of the house, the other is price of the house. Now, if I assume that this is my input data and this is my output data, so what I have to learn a mapping from input to output data. So what I have done is I have collected data for a particular city about the prices of different houses, and I know a house of 210 square feet price is about $400,000 US. Okay, so what we do is on y-axis I plot the price, and on x-axis I plot the size, and then for all these data points I plot them in the Euclidean space. All this has been plotted in the Euclidean space, in two-dimensional Euclidean space. Okay, so now problem is very simple. Can I learn a function which can, so can I do something like this? Suppose this is my variable y, output variable. This is my variable x. Now out of this data, can I learn a function f or h, suppose can I learn a function h which can transform every input variable x into output variable y. So what I'm looking at is some function h which can transform every xi into every yi. So this is what we are looking at. So if I can learn what is this function h or what is this model h, then for any given value of x, even if it is a new value for which we don't have the y, we can estimate the price of the house. Okay. Now in this case, what could be this h? If you look at the scatter plot, it looks like there is a linear relationship between the input variable and output variable. So we can fit a line, and in this case, this would be a largely linear relationship. So we can learn a kind of, so h would be essentially some kind of equation of a line which says that y would be a linear function of x based on what is the slope. Okay. So what have we done? We have taken a training set, we have applied a learning algorithm, and what we have arrived at is a function h. Now your machine learning scientist job is complete. If you're able to arrive or to derive this function h, then your job is done. Now what remains to be done? For any new value of x, I can apply this function h and I can get the value of y. So as simple as this. So what you have to learn is, from the training data, you have to learn the function h. So essentially what I'm doing is, now this is my training set. So just to show you an example, a part of this is training set and a part of this is test set. What I have done, what is my training set? In training set, I know the output for each input, whereas in test set, I actually know, but I have to guess. Okay, so that I can check how accurate is my algorithm that we have just, the model that we have just developed. So why machine learning is becoming popular? Number one, we have large amount of data which cannot be processed manually. So we need automated programs which can automatically make sense of data. Number two, we also have the right kind of environment. So these two are environmental variables. Machine learning would not have been possible if you don't have cheap computing power or if you don't have higher amount of storage. Okay. So what we have is, we have cheap computing power and we have high amount of storage. Okay. So if this was not possible, machine learning would not be possible. And number three, we have newer kind of problems for which we may not have any well-known algorithm which can be used to solve it. So we have to apply new kind of models which can be used to solve this. And what are the applications in which machine learning is being applied? Almost everywhere. For web search, so learning to rank is popular example. In computational biology, computational finance, e-commerce, robotics, natural language processing, information retrieval, social networks, debugging, so even in software engineering. So you name any favorite area and machine learning is being applied. Okay, so everybody is trying to learn machine learning because machine learning is useful for everyone. Okay. So I will show you one simple example of machine translation. Okay. Now what is this? What has happened? Machine translation, people are trying since World War II, World War I, World War II. So at least till from 1940s and 1950s, people are trying to design programs for machine translation. And a lot of this, funding to these kind of programs was actually in the period of World War II, where Americans wanted to translate all the Russian military literature in English. Okay, so because the amount of literature was used, so what they wanted is that if some kind of computer program can be made which can automatically translate all the Russian literature into English, then their job would be simplified. They could, translate all the Russian military literature into English, and they could use that. Okay. But there were a lot of problems, and initially what people tried to do is they tried to do a rule-based approach. Now, what is a rule-based approach? In rule-based approach, domain knowledge of experts is being used, and what they do is they design rules. Okay, for this input sentence, let's say we have two languages, Hindi and English. Now, what the translator will do is code a set of rules that for this Hindi word, this English word should come. For this Hindi phrase, this English phrase should come. For this Hindi sentence, this English phrase should come. So different rules of translation would be programmed into a computer program. So this was the approach at least till 95, 96 or till 90s. Okay. But what has changed since introduction of Google and since, availability of cheap computing power and large memories is that machine translation started to follow a different approach. And what was this approach? Rather than rule-based translation, people have started to follow statistical machine translation. We call it SMT. And what we do is, now in this case, the model that we develop, it knows no rules. No rules in the sense it doesn't know any domain rules. कि हिंदी में ये word आएगा तो English में ये word आएगा. That it doesn't know. So nobody programs it. What actually happens is that we have a parallel corpora. What is this parallel corpora? For example, suppose I have billions of sentences in language 1. What I need is equivalent sentences in language 2. So if I have billions of sentences pairs in language 1 and language 2, then I can learn a model which can automatically learn associations between words and phrases in language 1 with the words and phrases in language 2. So what will happen? What will happen is that patterns in language 1 would automatically be converted into language 2. So what we are learning is a kind of symbol substitution, okay, a kind of symbol manipulation. Okay. So what we are learning? We're learning if language 1 has a particular pattern, and language 2 has a corresponding pattern, what is it that we can do so that pattern 1 can be substituted by pattern 2? So this is what the model will learn, and this is what statistical machine translation is. Okay. So if your model is developed, then you can apply a new input text and you can get the output text. So machine translation is a very good example of machine learning in action, where what we do is we apply a statistical machine translation which learns rules, okay, of equivalences in sentences between two languages. Now I'm showing you a picture. Now in this picture, as you could see, this is me. But in addition to other people, there's also a machine. Now this one is a machine. Okay. And this machine is what? It's a humanoid robot. Okay. And what it can do is, this humanoid robot has all the language processing capabilities. It can speak, it can listen, it can understand the language, it can answer questions, it can, so the name is Arthur, it can, and the price is something like $60,000 US. Okay. So in addition to this, it can also express emotions. Okay. It can also express emotion. So if you say something funny, probably the expression would be funny. Okay. So what goes inside? Inside, you have to program a lot of programs which makes make this machine understand that this is funny, or this expression has to be generated, and so on. Okay. Now, some introductory reference books on machine learning. I find, I have taught this course at some point of time, and I found these books as wonderful books. So this remains a classic, a short book. You can read it very quickly. Then, 3 other popular books. If you're more from a probability and a statistics side, you can use this book, Bayesian Reasoning and Machine Learning. So this is a Bayesian inference thing. And, a lot of this is, all the exercises are done in MATLAB. So you can use this book. If you're more in, a Python kind of thing, so these 2 books, both by people from industry, Machine Learning, A Probabilistic Perspective, MIT Press, Kevin Murphy, and Christopher M. Bishop, Pattern Recognition and Machine Learning, Springer 2013. You can use either of these 2 books, which have, complete comprehensive description of machine learning algorithms. So if you read any of them, you will become an expert. Well, this is a cartoon that I often show whenever I have taken this class. If I'm a machine learning scientist, what does society think that I do? They think that, there are a lot of machines, I'm training them in a classroom and so on. What my friends think I do, they think that I'm doing some very sophisticated piece of hardware, software, and so on. What my parents think I do is that some sophisticated computer systems and I am programming them. What other programmers think I do is that I'm writing some very complicated mathematics and so on. And what I think I do is, I also think, that I'm doing something very complex, complicated, and so on. But as a machine learning scientist, what most of the people are actually doing is importing some routine from a Python library. So if you want to apply machine learning to your task, you don't have to be, an expert to write everything from scratch. There are a lot of libraries. The only thing that you have to know is you have to know which model will be applicable in which kind of problems. So you may not have to code anything at all. Okay, because there are a lot of libraries, a lot of codes already available. What you need to know is you have to have a good understanding of machine learning models so that you can appreciate that for this kind of problem, this kind of model will apply. And as a result, what you can do is you can import that particular set of routines and models. Let's look at one example, an information retrieval, which is a text task, and then we move to classification and clustering. What is information retrieval? So when you do a Google search, you are actually doing an information retrieval task. You're doing an information retrieval task. Okay. So you have a search engine. You gave a query and you got some results. And what actually happened is that you wanted to search about something, some information need. You gave some query terms to the search engine, and the search engine compared those search terms with some document terms and so on, and you get set of results. And these results are shown to you in some ranked order. So some results will come in page 1, some results will come in page 2, and so on. So this ranking is essentially a machine learning task, learning to rank. Okay. So what are the things that you have? You have a document collection. Now for web search engine, the document collection is the entire World Wide Web. What is information need? The task about which you want to know. Okay. And which results are good results? I would say a result is a good result if it is relevant to my query, if it contains information about the topic that I am searching. And what is the goal of an information retrieval search engine? The goal of an information retrieval engine is that to retrieve documents with information that is relevant to the user's information need. Now, how does this happen? A lot of machine learning is being used in this particular problem. So what actually happens is, this is the side of information retrieval that is visible to the user. Now this entire part is hidden. Okay, so this runs in background. So this is the background process and this is the foreground process where you see whatever is happening. Okay, so as a user, you give a user query. This query is expanded. It is converted into system query by the browser, and then it goes to the search engine. So search engine performs a retrieval and ranking function. It retrieves the relevant documents and then it ranks them in a particular order of relevance. And that is where you see the answer set. And this answer set, because the answers are many times in thousands or more than hundreds of thousands. So what happens is that you are shown results one page at a time. So you are shown, let's say, 10 results in one page, and then you go to page 2, another 10 results, and so on. Okay. But how does this retrieval and ranking retrieves the results? So what runs in the background is this kind of process. So what does the search engine maintains? Search engine maintains a data structure called inverted index. For every term, it maintains a postings list that this term is contained in document this, document ID, this, document ID, this, and so on. And how is this inverted index created? This inverted index is constructed out of the total document collection. And how is this document collection obtained? This document collection is obtained from the World Wide Web by applying a large number of crawlers. So the World Wide Web is crawled. Everything is copied locally into a data directory. And this, whatever local copies that you get in the search engine system, that is subjected to an indexing process, and inverted index is constructed, and then a retrieval and ranking function is applied. Okay. So retrieval is based on lookup into inverted index, and ranking is based on two kind of relevance assessments. One of them is called query dependent ranking. The other is called query independent ranking. So query dependent ranking means that if you change the query, the rank of the documents may change. So the rank of a particular document depends on what is the query that you're looking at. And what is query independent ranking? It depends on the link structure. So you may have heard about PageRank algorithm. So PageRank algorithm essentially is an example of query independent ranking. So the ranking that web search engines do is they use a mixture of query dependent as well as query independent ranking. Now, in order to process the text, we have to represent it. Okay. We have to represent it into a proper data structure, into a proper data format, so that programs can be applied on this. Okay. And what is it that we do? The most popular, so there are two kinds of representations popular. One of them is vector space, the other is a graph-based model. Now, vector space model is more popular. So what happens is that in vector space model, each document is represented as a vector of term values. Okay. So what we do is each document that is there, instead of words, we replace it by numerical values, numerical weights. And this WIJs are usually TF into IDF. Now, TF stands for term frequency, IDF stands for inverse document frequency. So what actually happens is that, suppose your total document collection has n documents. Okay, your document collection, जितने भी documents आपने इकट्ठा किए हैं, चाहे web से हो या आपका local collection हो, you have n documents. Just assume you have n documents. The first step that I do is I create a vocabulary from all these n documents. Now, what is this vocabulary? Vocabulary is the number of distinct words. So set of distinct words that occur in the whole document collection. So if all these n documents taken together, the number of distinct words, let's assume it is m. So what we do is we will convert each document into a vector of size m. So how many documents would be there? How many vectors would be there? We will have vector 1 to vector n, and each vector will have how many entries? It will have m entries. So what is going to happen now? All the text documents that you actually had, they are now converted into numerical vectors of size m each, and these numerical vectors are usually the TF-IDF values. Now, what is this TF-IDF values? What we do is TF says term frequency. Now, term frequency of a term I in document J is the number of times it occurs in that document, and we log normalize it. So Fij is the frequency of occurrence of term I in J if it occurs, and 0 otherwise. We log normalize it, and then we do some Laplacian correction. So term frequency is 1 plus log Fij. So this is the most commonly used. There are other measures also, but this is the most commonly used. What is IDF? IDF is log of n by ni. What is ni? Ni is the number of documents in which this term occurs. I will show an example so this will become more clear. Ni is the number of, so for example, suppose you extracted all the m terms, you extracted the vocabulary, and then you look at a term, let's say there is a term the, the. Now this term the, if it occurs in all the n documents, so what will be ni? Ni will be n. So n is the total number of documents. So log of n by n is equal log of 1. And what is log of 1? On any base, it is equal to 0. So IDF is equal to 0 for a term which occurs in all the documents. So if you multiply TF with IDF, what will happen? The weight of all those terms which occur in all the documents, the IDF part will become 0. So as a result, the weight will become 0. And when will this Wij be high? This Wij would be high if both of these terms are high. And when are these terms high? This would be high if a term occurs many times in a document. And this would be high if a term occurs only in few documents. Okay. So this is how we learn weight of each term within each document. And that is how these documents are represented. Now let's look at an example, how we have to do it. Let's look at an example that we have 4 documents in my document collection, D1, D2, D3, and D4. Let's assume these are toy examples, simple examples with the documents only have these many words. So the document 1 has these words, document 2 has these words, and so on. Now, what is it that we have to do? What you see is a document where each document is a set of words. And what we have to do is we have to convert each of these documents into numerical vectors. How to do it? The first step is I have to read all the 4 documents to extract the set of distinct words. So what I do, I extract the vocabulary. Okay. To, do, is, be, or, not. So these are all distinct terms that occur in all the 4 documents taken together. Okay. What is my next step? I have to learn term frequency of each term in each document. So TFI1 is the term frequency of ith term in document 1, term frequency of ith term in document 2, term frequency of ith term in document 3, term frequency of ith term in document 4. Okay. And what are these values? Now look at this term 2. How many times does it occur in document 1? 1, 2. So there are 4 occurrences. And what is the definition of TFI? TFI is 1 plus log of Fij. So what is Fij here? 4. So if we take the base as 2, log of 4 on base 2 is equal to 2. And 1 plus 2 is equal 3. Look at second term, do. How many times does it occur here? 2, 1 occurrence and do second occurrence. So how many times does it occur? 2. So what is the term frequency? 1 plus log of 2. So 1 plus log of 2 on base 2 is 1. So 1 plus 1 is 2. So that is how we learn. We compute the term frequency for all these terms. So what do we get? From this calculation, I have got the term frequency vectors. And all these vectors are of equal size. What is the size? This is equal to 14. And what is 14? 14 is the vocabulary size, the number of distinct words that this collection has. Okay. What is the next step? I have to learn the IDF. Okay. What is IDF? IDF is to do is to be is to do. Look at first document. So what about 2? In how many documents 2 occurs? It occurs in document 1, it occurs in document 2, and that's it. It doesn't occur beyond this. Okay. So what is the case? This is occurring in 2 documents. So what is IDF? The IDF would be log of n by ni. So what is ni? Ni is 2 and n is 4. So 4 by 2 is 2 and log of 2 on base 2 is 1. So this is its IDF. Similarly, look at the word do. How many terms this document do occurs? This word do occurs in 3 documents. पहले में आ रहा है. It is there even in 3rd document and 4th document. So out of 4 documents, it occurs in 3 documents. So its document frequency is 3. So what do I get? Log of 4 by 3. So log of 4 by 3 on base 2 would be 0.415. So what I have got? I have got an IDF vector. So IDF vector would be just 1, whereas TF vectors would be as many vectors as there are number of documents. Okay. So what is the next step? I'm going to multiply TF with IDF. So what happened? I multiplied TF with IDF. So D1 is my TF IDF vector is this. So rest all these dot entries are actually zeros. D2 is this, D3 is this, and D4 is this. So these are my TF IDF vectors. So what has happened? This text collection of terms is actually now converted into a document, into a numerical vector. So all these are weighted numerical vectors. Okay. Now what I can do, if I want to find out how similar are 2 documents, I can apply some very simple calculation. What can I do? I can do cosine similarity between 2 vectors. Okay. Now suppose there are 2 vectors. I take angle between them, which is theta, and I take cos theta. Now if theta is 0, what does this mean? That these 2 vectors overlap. So what is cos 0? Cos 0 is 1. Okay. So what I do is I take dot product of these 2 vectors. So I define a variable. Cosine similarity between 2 documents would be dot product of their unit vectors. Now what is this? VD1 divided by norm of VD1 and VD2 divided by norm of VD2. What is norm? Norm is all these values squared and then an under root. Okay. So this norm, this value is divided by norm because it is a process of length normalization. So what we want to do is we want to reduce the effect of varying size of different documents. So that is where we length normalize the vectors. Okay. So similarity between 2 documents is a unit product of, the dot product of their unit vectors. And if this is 1, this means that these 2 vectors are exactly identical. So I can estimate similarity between 2 documents. So what I'm trying to do is I'm saying that if the 2 documents contain similar terms, same terms, then they are most likely semantically similar. So this is an approximation that we go with. This is an assumption that we make, that syntactic similarity could be a good approximation of semantic similarity. So if the two documents use similar words, then most likely they're talking about the same topic, they're talking about the same things. Okay. So that is where, this is the principle on which the entire information retrieval is based on. So so what happens if this is my query vector and this is my document vector, what I can do in order to rank which is most relevant document, I can take dot product of this query for multiple documents. And whichever gives me the highest value, that would be the highest ranked document. So this is one example of ranking. Okay. So suppose I show you an example. Suppose I have a query to do for the document collection set that we have. So what do? I convert this into a query vector. Same process, So this also is converted into a numerical vector. And what do I next is I compute cosine similarity of this query vector with all the 4 documents, D1, D2, D3, D4. Let's see. These were the 4 documents. So what I can do is I compute Q D1, Q dot product D2, Q dot product D3, Q dot product D4. And I get these as the values. So I can use these cosine similarity values as my ranks of relevance. In this case, it appears that D1 is the most relevant document because it contains most of the common terms. So what I have shown is that these representations of documents into numerical vectors can then be, once you have represented them into numerical vectors, you can apply the whole linear algebra. You can apply the all vector algebra. And that is how you can compute all this. Now this I'm leaving as an exercise. Would you like to try? I can break for 1 or 2 minutes. Suppose I have D1, D2, D3. These are my 3 documents. And my query is new times. I want to find out which document would be the most relevant. So what is it that we should do? What is the first step? The first step is I have to create vocabulary. Okay. Then what is the second step? How many distinct terms are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there are 6 distinct terms. So each document would be represented as a vector of 6 items, 6 numerical values. And each document will have the term weights which are TF into IDF. Now let's see how it is happening. Now in this case, this is D1, D2, D3. These are the 6 terms. Angelis doesn't occur here, so it is 0. It doesn't occur here, so it is 0. It occurs 1 time, so it is 1. Similarly, 0, 0, 1, and so on. And similarly, what we do, we also do IDF. IDF values for Angelis, loss, new, post, and so on, all these. So based on that, what we have done, we have computed vectors. What is this? D1 is this vector. This is numerical vector D1. This is numerical vector D2. And this is numerical vector D3. What is the next step that we have to do? My documents are represented as numerical vectors. The next step is I have to convert the query also into vectors. So what is my query? New times. So I convert it to vector. Okay. So this is my new times vector. New occurs twice, so 2 by 2 and so on. Okay. What is the next step that I do is I length normalize D1, D2, D3, D4. So these are the lengths. And then what do? I compute dot products of D1 with Q, D2 with Q, D3 with Q, and I get these as my values. So which document would be the ranked first? D1 would be ranked first for this query. Okay. If you want to read more on IR and how machine learning can be applied for IR, so this one is a more IR centric book where this is a more comprehensive book on information retrieval with a good historical introduction as well. But this is a newer book. 2008. And this is a wonderful read. This book is also available free to download. So even from Christopher Manning's site, you can download this book for free. So you can download it, and it's a wonderful book. If you read it, you would benefit like anything. If you want to have more resources, now this is a course that I teach in information retrieval. You can go to this page and you can get some more resources on information retrieval and machine learning intersection. Okay, let's now go to machine learning and text processing. Let me break the presentation here and see if there are some questions at this point of time. So can somebody confirm everything is audible? Perfect.
Yes, sir.
Perfectly audible. No disturbance or something?
No, sir.
Okay. So anyone, if you have a question at this moment? So Manishji, how much time I have? Another 1 hour.
Yes, sir. 1 hour left.
Okay, till 11.
Yes, sir.
So if you have any question, you can type in the chat box. I can read and I can try to answer. So at any point of time, if anybody has a question, I would.
Yeah, sure, sir.
You type in the chat box, and once we finish it, then we can take up all these questions one by one.
Participants are requested to type their questions in the chat box.
So this also helps me in just keeping quiet for a minute. 1 घंटे से मैं लगातार बोल रहा हूँ, 2-3 मिनट रुक जाता हूँ.
Yes, sir.
Now that is a problem, Manish ji. फेस टू फेस इंटरेक्शन का मजा ही और है, क्योंकि आप बीच में रुक सकते हैं, आप लोगों से बात कर सकते हैं. यहाँ तो बस ऐसा लगता है कि बस हम बोलते जा रहे हैं.
Yeah.
और इस मोड में ये भी प्रॉब्लम है कि आप सबको अलाउ भी नहीं कर सकते, क्योंकि कुछ समझ ही नहीं आएगा कौन क्या बोल रहा है.
बिल्कुल सर.
So in fact, मैं 2-3 मिनट का ब्रेक ले सकता हूँ. I can have a tea or something.
Yeah. Thanks.
So I'm stopping my video. We'll have tea and we'll quickly come back.
Sure, sir.
audible? Manish sir? Vivek sir?
Ashwin sir?
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Sir, Vivek sir is not audible?
Sir, he has taken break for 2-3 minutes.
Okay, okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so let's start back. Sorry, it took slightly more time. Okay. So I'm sharing the presentation again. So Manishji, can you confirm it's visible again?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. It is visible.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So let's now move to machine learning, how it can be applied for text processing. So what we have seen is, in order to process text, often we have to represent the text in some format, and I have shown you one model which is called vector space model. Similarly, there is another popular model which is used, and that popular model is it's called graph-based model, where instead of representing text documents as vectors, we represent them as graphs, nodes, and edges between them. Okay, so that's another model, and there also machine learning can be applied. Now let's look at the one type where if we have vector space model, how we can apply machine learning for text processing. Now, what are the major text processing tasks that we come across? One, we may have to classify a text document into one of multiple given classes, or we may have to group. Now, this classification clustering are quite similar in the sense that this is an example of supervised machine learning. This is an example of unsupervised machine learning. Okay. Then we have a task, sentiment analysis. Now, sentiment analysis is also a kind of classification. What we do here is sentiment analysis is done at different levels. So many times we have to classify the whole document into positive or negative class, or sometimes we have to extract aspects, and then we have to tell whether this aspect is positive, whether the other aspect is negative, and so on. Then similarly, we have another task called summarization, where a big piece of text document is summarized into a small part. Okay, just like Prezi writing that we have done in schools. Then disambiguation. Many times the text is used has multiple meanings. For example, I went to the bank yesterday. So I went to the bank yesterday is incomplete unless I tell for what purpose. So if I say I went to the bank yesterday for fishing, so then I am talking about the river bank and not the commercial bank. Okay. So then we also have topic modeling, we have information extraction, machine reading. So there are number of things where machine learning is applied to different kind of text processing tasks. And nowadays there are also intelligent recommender systems. So what they do is, if you're reading something, then they will recommend you relevant resources which can be used to augment your knowledge, to enhance your knowledge on that particular topic. So they automatically identify what is it that you're reading, and they will suggest you what additional you should read. Okay. Let's look at first example of classification. So what is document classification? So document classification is like a simple pattern classification where one pattern is classified from another pattern. Okay. So there may be 2 patterns, there may be 3 patterns, and so on. So what we have to do is we have to learn the decision boundaries. What is document classification? Let's look at an example. Okay. So given a fixed set of classes C1 to Cj and a training set. So as I told you, document classification is an example of supervised learning. A training set of labeled documents. What we have to do is, so each document is labeled. So each document in D is labeled with a particular class C. Okay. And what we have to do is we have to learn a learning method or algorithm which can enable us to. So this is the learning function that we have to learn. For each document in class X, it is classified into, each document in the collection X is classified into one class C. So this is what we have to do. And once we have learned the learning function D, then rest of the job is simple. We can apply for any new and we can get its class. So this is an example. Documents could be classified like within regions, industries, or they could be classified in countries, topics, and so on. Now let's look at this example. Suppose you have represented the documents in vector space model. And let's assume that I have projected this vector space model into 2D. It's a 2D projection into the Euclidean space. Okay. Now, what we see here is there are some documents that are red colored. They are government class. They are about science and they are about arts. Okay. Now, suppose I get a new document. So this is my new document. So how can I tell that what is the class that this document belongs to? Okay. So this depends to a large extent on the decision boundaries that we may have learned. Suppose this is the decision boundary that we may have learned. So if this is the decision boundary, then this belongs to the class government. Okay. So now this is the one. Okay. So there are different approaches that we can follow, and that is how we have different algorithms also to classify whether this document should be classified in this class or what. So what is the similarity hypothesis? It says that if the vector positions, if this document vector is adjacent to document vectors of one particular class, more adjacent, so then it should also belong to the same class. So this is called contiguity hypothesis. Okay. So that means if this vector is close to other vectors of one class, then this also has similar words as compared to these other documents. Okay. So if this is my decision boundary, then this belongs to class government. Now these are some popular examples: naive Bayes, K nearest neighbor, Rocchio's classification, support vector machine. Some of this you may have learned in different talks. Okay. Now what is naive Bayes? Naive Bayes is based on Bayesian inference, and what we do is we compute probability of a document D in belonging to class C. So we say, given a class C, the probability that document D will belong to, so this is conditional probability, class T is proportional to a prior probability and some posterior probability. And what is this posterior probability? The posterior probability that this class contains terms Tk, where Tk terms are within the document. Okay. So PTKC is the conditional probability of a term Tk occurring in document of class C. So it's a very simple algorithm. What we do is we compute a prior probability of a document belonging to a class, and then we compute posterior probabilities that each terms contribute for belonging to one particular class. And whichever class value, whichever argument C belonging to C maximizes this value, probability of CD, that C argument is taken as my maximum a posteriori class. So this is what naive Bayes is. I will show you with an example. So because these are, these multiplication terms, these values are often very small. So multiplication of smaller terms becomes further smaller. So we can replace, without any loss, we can replace this multiplication by addition, and we can log normalize both sides. So this can be replaced by C map is equal to argmax log PC plus summation of log PTKC values. Now what are these? Now let's look at, so if you have to compute this C map, you have to compute prior probability and you have to compute posterior. What is this prior? The prior is computed by NCN. Okay. So what does this mean? Suppose my document collection has 100 documents. Okay. And there are only two classes. Okay. One class has 90 documents, the other C1 has 90 documents, C has 90 documents, and C complement has 10 documents. Okay. Then any new document that comes from the same distribution, there would be a probability of 0.9 that it will go to C1 and probability of 0.1 that it will go to C complement. This is called prior probability. So number of documents in a particular class divided by total number of documents is the prior probability that a document will be assigned to a particular class. So this is prior without looking at the data. But then when you look at the data, you look at term occurrences. And what you try to find out is whether the new document that I'm seeing, whether its term profile matches more with the class C or matches more with the class C complement. If it matches more with class C, then this document will have a higher posterior probability of belonging to class C. Otherwise, it will belong to class C complement. How do we compute this? This is computed by TCT divided by TCT dash, where T dash is each term in the vocabulary. Okay. So if you read the book by Christopher Manning, you can clearly understand this example. So this is the example, and there are multiple models of naive Bayes, multinomial as well as naive Bayes, as well as Bernoulli's naive Bayes. In multinomial, what we do is we extract the vocabulary first, we count the number of documents, and then we count the number of documents in each class. Then we compute prior, then we compute text, and then we compute the conditional probabilities. So once this part is done, we say the training has been completed. Then we apply multinomial naive Bayes with class, vector, class, vocabulary, prior, conditional probability, D, all these matrices. And then we compute a score for all this, and whichever gives me the highest argument, that is the class it is assigned to. I will show an example. This example is drawn from the book of Christopher Manning, chapter 13. Okay. Suppose this is the example. My training set has 4 documents. Okay. Out of this, 3 documents belong to class China. So C is China. one document belongs to not China. Now I have a question whether document 5 belongs to class China or not China. So what we have to do first? We have to do training first. And what is the training that we do? We have to compute prior probabilities and posterior probabilities. How do we compute prior probability? So what is the prior probability that this belongs to class China? This belongs to class China 3 by 4. This belongs to not China 1 by 4. Because there were total of 4 documents and there are 3 documents in China and 1 document here. So prior probability of China is 3 by 4 and probability of complement China complement is 1 by 4. So this is done. So as you could see here is we compute probability of D5 belonging to C, probability of D5 belonging to C complement, and these are the prior values that we have computed. What is the other thing that we have to compute? We have to compute what is the evidence that each term adds to belong to a given class. Chinese belonging to class China. So let's look here. How do we compute? What is the probability of Chinese belonging to class China? Let's look here. How many times it occurs here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In class C it occurs 5 times. TCT, number of occurrences of this term in that class, plus Laplacian correction divided by total number of terms, and this is due to the Laplacian correction. So we get 6 by 14 and it becomes 3 by 7. Okay. Similarly, probability of Tokyo belonging to this, how many times Tokyo occurs here? This is 0. So 0 plus 1 to class China. Similarly, we compute probability of Chinese belonging to not China. So for each term, we compute probability that it belongs to class China or not China. And we get these values. Okay. And then what do we do next is we compute. So this term prior is prior to China. So what is the probability that document 5 belong to class C? Is 3 by 4 is the prior. And what is the probability that Chinese belongs to class China? 3 by 7. So 3 by 7 once, 3 by 7 again, 3 by 7 again. So 3 by 7 3 times. Then what is the probability that Tokyo belongs to China? Look here. Probability of Tokyo is 1 by 14. So 1 by 14. What is the probability that Japan belongs to China? 1 by 14. So this value comes out to be 0.003. Similarly, we do probability of D5 belonging to class China complement. So this would be 1 by 4 is the prior. And what is the probability that Chinese belong to not China? 2 by 9. Tokyo belong to not China? 2 by 9. So this is 2 by 9, 2 by 9, 2 by 9, again 2 by 9 and 2 by 9. So this is 0.001. So which class the document D5 will belong to? The one which has higher probability. So document D5 will belong to class China. So that is how we can apply naive Bayes to classify whether this new document that we have just seen, it belongs to one class or another. And these probabilities are learned from the training set that we have. Okay. Now I'm leaving this as an example for you. We don't have time, so I can't do it. So I have already shared the slides. You can do this example whenever you find time. So we have an example where we have a class C and where we have a class J, 2 examples in each, and we have a new document and we have to find out what is the class that it belongs to. Okay, so you can try. Let's look at second example, K nearest neighbor classification. Now this is a very, very simple vector space classifier. So to classify a document D into class C, what we do is we define a K neighborhood. Okay, we define a K neighborhood and then we count the number of documents in the K neighborhood for each class. Okay, so for example, in this case, suppose this is the test document that we have. So what we define is we define a K neighborhood. Let's assume this is 6. Generally, we don't keep the value of K as even because then there may be ties. So generally the value of K is kept as odd values. So we define as 3 neighborhood or 5 neighborhood or 7 neighborhood. Okay, let's assume that we have a 6 neighborhood. So what we do is we look at the 6 most similar documents from this test document. And then we see out of these neighboring 6 documents, which is the majority class. If the majority class is red, then this document will also belong to the same majority class. It's a very simple algorithm. Nearest neighbor, we call it K nearest neighbor. So we look at K nearest neighbors, and whatever is the majority class of the K nearest neighbor, the new document will also belong to that same class. So this is a very simple vector space classifier. There is another variant to this, which is called, so this is K nearest neighbor. The other variety is Rockius classifier. So this is also a vector space classifier, but unlike the K nearest neighbor, what we do here in this case is not what you just saw, but what we do is we compute centroid of this, we compute a centroid of this class, and we compute centroid of this class. And suppose the centroid vector. So centroid vector is sum divided by total number of vectors. So this is centroid vector center. So this is center of gravity of each sphere. So what I do next is I compute the distance between the test document with each centroid. Whichever centroid is closest to this document vector, we say that this document will belong to that class. So now, instead of computing distance between this document with each of the documents, what we do is for each class we compute a centroid vector first, and then we compute the distances between centroids. So this is called Rockius. So it is also based on contiguity hypothesis, but unlike computing distances between individual documents, now distances will be computed by computing distance between centroid. Now one question may be, how do I compute distance? So distance can be taken as 1 minus cosine similarity. So if two documents are exactly similar, their cosine similarity would be 1. So their distance would be 0. 1 minus 1 is 0. So distance is usually defined as 1 minus cosine similarity. There could be other similarity measures also. So this is Rockius classifier. Okay. So this is an example you can try. A very simple example. Let's come to second task, document clustering. Now, unlike classification, document clustering is unsupervised. So we don't have target classes here. So what do I do here? In document clustering, I go based on the fact that similar documents should go in same group and dissimilar documents should go in different groups. Okay. So clustering is the process of grouping a set of objects into classes of similar objects such that documents within a cluster should be similar and documents from different clusters should be dissimilar. Okay? And it is an example of unsupervised learning. अब जैसे अगर आपको मैं ये एग्जांपल दिखाऊं, यूक्लिडियन स्पेस में कुछ डॉक्यूमेंट्स को प्रोजेक्ट किया गया है, तो आपको बहुत क्लियर समझ आ रहा है इसको देख के कि ये एक क्लस्टर है, ये एक क्लस्टर ऑफ पॉइंट्स है, ये क्लस्टर ऑफ पॉइंट्स, ठीक है. बट ये हमको तो समझ आ रहा है, मशीन को कैसे हम एल्गोरिथमिकली ट्रेन करें कि वो इसको लर्न कर सके कि ये 3 क्लस्टर्स यहाँ पे हैं और ये क्लस्टर के सेंट्रॉइड्स, ठीक है. Now there are different applications of clustering that may be possible. Okay, एक एग्जांपल मैं आपको यहाँ दिखा रहा हूँ. इमेजिन करो ये क्लस्टी बीटा एक सर्च इंजन है. इमेजिन करो जो आप सर्च कर रहे हैं, जैसे अगर आपने सर्च किया जैगुआर, ठीक है, या जैसे यहाँ आपने सर्च किया टेक्स्ट क्लस्टरिंग. Now you get results, but at the same time you are also getting some additional information. What is this additional information? This says जितने 187 डॉक्यूमेंट आपको टेस्ट रिजल्ट्स में मिले, 187 रिजल्ट्स जो आपको दिख रहे हैं 251 रिजल्ट्स में से, टॉप 187, उसमें से 30 माइनिंग के बारे में है, 19 जीन के बारे में है, 13 क्लस्टरिंग एल्गोरिथम के बारे में है, 8 टेक्स्ट डॉक्यूमेंट के हैं, 13 रिसेप्टर के बारे में, एंड सो ऑन. सो जो रिजल्ट्स आपको मिले उसको आपने क्या किया, यू यूज अ क्लस्टरिंग एल्गोरिथम एंड यू ग्रुप देम बाय देयर सिमिलैरिटीज, और ग्रुप करने के बाद हर क्लस्टर को हमने लेबल कर दिया. सो क्लस्टर लेबल करने के लिए भी एल्गोरिथम्स होते हैं, उनको बोलते हैं क्लस्टर लेबलिंग एल्गोरिथम्स. तो पहला चीज हमको क्लस्टरिंग एल्गोरिथम सीखना होगा. दूसरा, क्लस्टर लेबलिंग एल्गोरिथम्स कैन बी अप्लाइड टू लर्न लेबल ऑफ अ क्लस्टर, कि उसको किस नाम से जाना जाए. सो अभी फायदा क्या हुआ, अगर मेरा टेक्स्ट क्लस्टरिंग का सर्च का पर्पस था टेक्स्ट क्लस्टरिंग माइनिंग के बारे में जानने के लिए, तो मैं क्या करूंगा, आई विल क्लिक ऑन दिस and all my results would now only be limited to 30 results. So this is kind of a vertical filter that we apply on search results. Okay, so clustering can be used to do vertical grouping on top of results. So this you can try Clusty.com VBC mode. So this is how you can try this thing. Now clustering algorithms are classified on two bases. One, whether they are flat or hierarchical. Flat is we are defining whether just a second, power cut हो गया. अच्छा. Okay. I am audible? Can somebody confirm?
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir.
Okay, okay, thank you. There was a power cut, so I just wanted to make sure. Okay. So, okay. So, flat algorithms where जैसे अगर मेरे पास multiple points हैं, so suppose और multiple points को हम इस तरह बांटें कि एक cluster, मतलब each document belongs to only one cluster. Okay. So इसको हम बोलेंगे flat. Hierarchical में हम क्या कर रहे हैं? That there are hierarchies of clusters. That documents belong to different clusters and these clusters belong to different clusters. So clusters को भी clusters किया अगर हम कर सके तो उसको बोलेंगे hierarchical algorithm. Okay. So flat में we have k-means and hierarchical में we have two approaches, bottom up or top down. So we call them as HAAC, hierarchical agglomerative clustering, and divisive clustering. Second basis is whether my clustering is hard or soft. Hard matlab each document belongs to exactly one cluster, or soft ka matlab it is like a fuzzy clustering. For example, fuzzy C-means is one example of soft clustering where each document may belong to more than one classes with a degree of membership. जैसे हम fuzzy sets में करते हैं. Now let's look at one popular partitioning algorithm, k-means. Okay. So what we do in partitioning method, we construct a partition of n documents into a set of k clusters. यहाँ पे हमको number of k पहले से पता होना चाहिए. K means में we should know the k in advance. Okay. अगर आपको नहीं पता है तो there are heuristics to learn what should be an appropriate value of k. Okay. But we assume that we know the value of k. Okay. So given a set of documents and a number k, we have to find a partition of k clusters that optimizes the chosen partitioning criteria. So there could be different partitioning criteria कि intra cluster similarity high होनी चाहिए और inter cluster similarity low होनी चाहिए. ठीक है. और उसके लिए हमको क्या करना पड़ेगा, हर cluster का हम centroid निकालते हैं. So what is centroid? जितने मेरे document vectors हैं उन सबको मैंने sum किया और उस क्लास में जितने हैं उनके टोटल नंबर यानी कार्डिनैलिटी से डिवाइड कर दिया, तो इसको मैं बोलूंगा ये मेरा सेंट्रॉइड वेक्टर बन गया. यानी सारे वेक्टर्स को सम करके उसको टोटल नंबर ऑफ डॉक्यूमेंट से टोटल नंबर ऑफ वेक्टर से डिवाइड कर दीजिए, दैट बिकम्स योर सेंट्रॉइड वेक्टर. ओके. सो लेट्स लुक एट एन एग्जांपल. ये की मींस का एल्गोरिथम मैं आपको एग्जांपल से दिखा रहा हूं. अगर मेरे पास डॉक्यूमेंट्स हैं और मुझे सबसे पहले क्या करना, आई सेलेक्ट के रैंडम सीड्स. ओके. फिर मैंने क्या किया, until my clustering method converges, I assign each di to some cluster cj so that distance between the centroid of that document with that cluster centroid is minimal. And then we update the seeds and centroid. So this is a iterative algorithm that we repeat and again. Now let's see. इसको examples में आपको दिखा रहा हूँ. Suppose ये मेरे पास document vector है और value of k is 2. Okay. मुझे मालूम है कि हमारे पास दो क्लस्टर्स हैं, मतलब हमें इसको दो क्लस्टर में बांटना है. तो पहला मेरा स्टेप क्या है, आई हैव टू रैंडमली सेलेक्ट एनी टू वेक्टर्स, एनी टू पॉइंट्स एज माय रैंडम सीड्स. ठीक है. इनको हम बोलेंगे इनिशियल रैंडम सेंट्रॉइड्स. तो हम वी हैव टू पिक टू सीड्स. ठीक है. सपोज वी हैव पिक्ड अप दीज टू सीड्स. एक सीड यहाँ रैंडमली पिक करना है तो कोई भी पिक हो सकता है. सो दिस इज वन सीड, दिस इज अनदर सीड. So we have randomly picked up seed vectors. अब मुझे क्या करना है, अब मुझे क्लस्टर्स बनाने हैं. कैसे बनाने हैं, इस सीड वेक्टर से सारे वेक्टर्स की डिस्टेंस में निकालूंगा, ऑल वेक्टर्स. ठीक है. और सिमिलरली इस सीड वेक्टर से भी सारे वेक्टर्स की डिस्टेंस में निकालूंगा. ठीक है. what will happen next? For each given vector, this will be assigned to the class जो जिसका centroid इसके closer है. जैसे अगर ये distance और ये distance, okay, let me erase it first. Suppose for this given document, ये distance ये आ रही है और ये distance ये आ रही है. So this document will be assigned to that cluster whose centroid is closer. तो इस केस में क्या होगा? Red को assign हो जाएगा. ठीक है? And this process we do for each document. Okay? So what is my next step? I assign documents to clusters. So आप clearly देख सकते हो आपके centroid vectors initially क्या थे? ये vector था और ये vector था. और जब आपने assignment किया तो ये इतने सारे documents ये red class को हो गए, including this, और ये सारे document ये blue class के हो. ठीक? So this is my second step. अब मैं क्या करूँगा? I will compute centroid of these clusters again. और जब मैंने सेंट्रॉइड्स फिर से इस पूरे क्लस्टर के निकाले तो ये सेंट्रॉइड यहाँ आया और ये सेंट्रॉइड यहाँ आया. सो आई हैव कंप्यूटेड सेंट्रॉइड्स अगेन. व्हाट इज द नेक्स्ट स्टेप? आई विल रीअसाइन क्लस्टर्स अगेन. अब मैं क्या करूँगा? इस नए सेंट्रॉइड से यानी इस डॉक्यूमेंट की डिस्टेंस में इससे भी निकालूंगा और इसकी डिस्टेंस में इस सेंट्रॉइड से भी निकालूंगा. जो क्लोजर होगा ये उसको असाइन हो जाएगा. ठीक है?
It is a iterative process, sir.
It is an iterative process. So this process will continue. And what is the next step? I have reassigned clusters. अब आप देखिए जो ये documents red थे ये सारे blue हो गए क्योंकि यहाँ से ये close हैं इस centroid से. So अभी मेरा क्या बन गया? एक centroid, एक cluster ये बन गया, एक cluster ये बन गया. अब मैंने reassign कर दिया. फिर मैं क्या करूँगा? I will again do this. I will again compute centroids. अब मेरे सेंट्रॉइड्स ये आए, फिर मैं रीअसाइन करूंगा. आई विल अगेन रीअसाइन क्लस्टर्स. इस केस में कोई चेंज नहीं हुआ. सो आई विल कीप ऑन इटरेटिवली रनिंग दिस एल्गोरिथम अंटिल दिस एल्गोरिथम कन्वर्जेस. अब क्वेश्चन ये है कि कब ये मेथड कन्वर्ज करेगा, या अगर ये कन्वर्ज नहीं करता है तो मैं कब तक इसको रन करूं. ठीक है? सो दिस इज व्हाट वी हैव डन. और आप देख सकते हो एक सेंट्रॉइड यहाँ से यहाँ मूव हुआ और दूसरा सेंट्रॉइड यहाँ से यहाँ. ठीक है? So what is the terminating condition for this algorithm? Well, there are several possibilities. I can say whichever occurs first. Either a fixed number of iterations have occurred, जैसे हम GA और algorithm में लिखते हैं, that repeat this process until the termination criteria that fitness is met, or these many iterations have already computed. So we can say I will repeat this until 100 iterations, or the document partitions remain unchanged for 5 consecutive iterations, or the centroid positions do not change. So whichever occurs earlier, based on that we can decide the termination criteria. So अगर centroid position नहीं बदल रही है इसका मतलब algorithm converge कर गया. So what is a good clustering? एक तरीका हो सकता है कि हम ये देखें कि इंट्रा क्लास सिमिलैरिटी लो है, सॉरी इंट्रा क्लास सिमिलैरिटी हाई होनी चाहिए, यानी similarity of documents within the same class should be high and similarity of two documents between two different clusters is low. Okay? एक तो ये है. दूसरा एक external criteria हम use कर सकते हैं जिसको हम बोलते हैं purity. Okay? That अगर हमें actual classes मालूम है किसी document के तो हम purity compute कर सकते हैं. ठीक है? जैसे इस केस में आप देखो ये मेरा cluster assignment है और हमने देखा इस क्लस्टर असाइनमेंट में 5 डॉक्यूमेंट रेड क्लास के हैं, एक ब्लू का है. तो ये कितना प्योर है? ये 5/6 प्योर है. इनमें 3-4 मेजॉरिटी जो है वो ब्लू है और 2 दूसरे के हैं, तो इसकी प्योरिटी 4/6 है. इसकी लेकिन ये तभी टेस्ट कर पाएंगे जब हमें एक्चुअल क्लासेस पता हो. ठीक है? टेस्ट करने के लिए हमें क्लासेस पता होने चाहिए. ठीक है? सो दिस इज क्लस्टरिंग. नाउ लेट्स लुक एट फाइनल एग्जांपल, अनदर 4-5 minutes and then I am done. Sentiment analysis. Sentiment analysis, as we know, it is assigning a document or a sentence or a particular aspect a label, whether it is positive or नेगेटिव, ठीक है। और अगर आप इमेजिन करो, अगर मेरे पास एक सेल फोन है, ओके, और सेल फोन के मेरे पास 10,000 रिव्यू है, ठीक है। 10,000 रिव्यू कैसे हैं? टेक्सचुअल रिव्यूज है। अगर मैं सेंटिमेंट एनालिसिस अप्लाई करूं, आई कैन गेट समथिंग लाइक दिस, ठीक है। मैंने एक प्रोग्राम चलाया और 10,000 रिव्यूज की एक समरी बन के आ गई, और कैसी समरी आ गई? ये ग्राफिकल समरी आ गई। दिस इज व्हाट वी कैन डू इन सेंटिमेंट एनालिसिस, ओके। कि अगर आप कोई सेल फोन खरीदना चाहते थे और आप श्योर नहीं थे कि वो सेल फोन अच्छा है कि बुरा, तो आपने क्या किया? उसके 10,000 रिव्यूज देखे और उस पर सेंटिमेंट एनालिसिस का प्रोग्राम चलाया, और आपने देखा कि ये नेगेटिव स्केल है या पॉजिटिव है, कि वॉइस क्वालिटी उसकी अच्छी है, स्क्रीन क्वालिटी अच्छी है। ये कहाँ से पता चला? रिव्यूज पढ़ के। बैटरी उतनी अच्छी नहीं है, साइज में उसकी रेटिंग्स पॉजिटिव है, वेट में भी उसकी रेटिंग्स मिक्स है पर ज्यादा पॉजिटिव, ठीक है। और इवन मोर, अगर आप सेलफोन 1 और सेलफोन 2 में श्योर नहीं है कि कौन सा खरीदना चाहिए, आप दोनों के रिव्यूज इकट्ठा कर लीजिए और दोनों को प्लॉट कर दीजिए। अब इस केस में आप क्लियरली डिसाइड कर सकते हैं कि सेलफोन 1 आउट परफॉर्म सेलफोन 2 on almost all parameters, so we should go for cellphone 1. So sentiment analysis can be used to take all these decisions. और sentiment analysis की दो तरह की approaches होती हैं, एक linguistics based approach है और एक machine learning based approach है। machine learning based approach जो है वो क्या करेगी? sentiment analysis के टास्क को एक क्लासिफिकेशन टास्क की तरह देखती है, that we have to classify the document or sentence or a particular aspect with its dependency into one particular class by using some classification algorithms, naive Bayes, max entropy, SVM, or so on. Or lexicon based is a different method which is based on dictionaries. Okay, so I can apply a machine learning classifier to do sentiment analysis if we know what is a machine learning classifier. Okay, so I am telling you some online tools that you can check. This is a wonderful tool, uclassify.com. आप इसमें कोई चीज कॉपी पेस्ट कर दीजिए, आपको ये उसका सेंटिमेंट, उसका मूड, उसका जेंडर सब कुछ बता देता है, ठीक है। सो दिस इज व्हाट यू कैन ट्राई। दिस देयर इज अनदर पॉपुलर टूल दैट यू कैन ट्राई एंड यू कैन यूज इट प्रोग्रामेटिकली आल्सो। ये एक एपीआई है, Alchemy API, which gives you sentiment at the level of document, sentence as well as an aspect. तो अगर आप कोई और प्रोग्राम बना रहे हैं और इसमें आपको सेंटिमेंट की जरूरत है, you can invoke Alchemy API. So these are some suggested readings for sentiment analysis. You can see from the slide that I have shared, and I am done. Thank you. So I am open to questions now.
Participants, you can ask the question. Sir, some question is written in chat box.
Okay, I am just opening my chat box. It's not showing chat box for me.
Sir, Mr. Aswin sir is asking about the applying ML algorithm for the text mining and information retrieval for using ML for the text mining. What exactly is difference in between the context with Wikipedia text?
Well, there is absolutely no difference. If you take text from Wikipedia or if you take text from anywhere else, that doesn't matter. Okay, so algorithms remain same. The only thing that you have to, you may have to look at is, अगर आप social media से text लेते हैं, okay, so you know it may have slangs, it may have smileys, it may have misspellings, so you have to keep that into mind. अगर आप Wikipedia से ले रहे हैं, so it would be more exact text. But in terms of algorithmic approach, there's almost no difference at all. So you can use the same algorithm अगर आपको Wikipedia के text को classify करना है या social media text को classify करना है.
Okay, sir. Sir, another question: how it is a different from the morphological image processing and machine learning for the translation and representation, sir?
Well, image के केस में बिल्कुल अलग चीज है. इमेज भी रिप्रेजेंट होती है. इमेज को रिप्रेजेंट करने के लिए हम उसको लो लेवल या हाई लेवल फीचर्स में रिप्रेजेंट करते हैं. जैसे हमने उसके पिक्सल वैल्यूज लिए, पिक्सल वैल्यूज के ब्लॉक्स लिए, और उसका U लिया, उसका सैचुरेशन लिया, उसका वैल्यू लिया. सो जैसे इमेज को न्यूमेरिकल वैल्यूज में रिप्रेजेंट करते हैं, उसी तरह टेक्स्ट को भी हम न्यूमेरिकल वेक्टर्स में रिप्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं. पर्पस सिर्फ यही है कि अगर हम इसको इस फॉर्म में रिप्रेजेंट करेंगे, तो उसको प्रोसेस करना आसान होगा, क्योंकि पूरा लीनियर अलजेब्रा और जो हमें पता है दैट कैन बी अप्लाइड एज इट इज.
Okay, sir.
Whatever you do, you have to represent, and that helps a lot.
Sir, Mr. Vinod Kumar is asking about, tell me some PhD topic in machine learning.
Well, machine learning में PhD topics की कमी नहीं है, बहुत कुछ कर सकते हैं. Machine learning algorithms पे भी आप काम कर सकते हो. जैसे one of my colleagues at South Asian University, रेशमा, उसने काम किया है ट्विन सपोर्ट वेक्टर मशीन पे. सो सपोर्ट वेक्टर मशीन में मैक्सिमम मार्जिन क्लासिफायर होता है, और उसने कहा कि अगर हम एक मार्जिन के बजाय अगर 2 मार्जिन निकालें, सो वन फंडामेंटल रिसर्च कुड बी आप मशीन लर्निंग एल्गोरिथम की डिजाइन पे ही काम करो. दूसरा रिसर्च टॉपिक हो सकता है कि आप मशीन लर्निंग एल्गोरिथम को किसी एक पर्टिकुलर डोमेन में अप्लाई करो, चाहे वो इमेज का डोमेन हो, चाहे वो साइबर सिक्योरिटी का डोमेन हो, चाहे वो बैंक फ्रॉड डिटेक्शन का डोमेन हो, चाहे वो टेक्स्ट का डोमेन हो. सो ऑन एनी डोमेन यू कैन अप्लाई मशीन लर्निंग एल्गोरिथम. और अगर उस डोमेन में पहले से काम नहीं हुआ है, तो आप जो भी काम करोगे वो आराम से पब्लिश होगा और नया काम.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Professor Vivek Kumar Singh, sir, for your valuable session. We learned a lot and understand the concept of machine learning for the text processing. We also learn about how to do the translation and how the information retrieval is done, their terminology, and many more. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you very much. And Manish, if you remember, I have already shared the slides, so you can share it with the participants. I have no objection at all.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Then I'm ready to sign off.
Yeah. Participant, please fill the feedback form.
Okay, Manish ji. Bye. Thank you.
Chat box. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot, sir.